Hello, my name is Clive Corcoran and welcome to my YouTube channel, the Corcoran Codex. What I want to discuss in this video is a rather topical subject, and I'm going to ask the question, is Michael Saylor, he is the chairman of a company called Strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy, is his Bitcoin Treasury strategy actually sound? To begin our discussion of this company Strategy, formerly known as MicroStrategy, I thought it would be useful to visit the company's own website, and we can see there on the homepage the statement that we are the world's first and largest Bitcoin Treasury company, and secondarily the largest independent publicly traded business intelligence company. I'll just touch on the second part here briefly. The company, when it was originally founded a long time ago, as we'll see, focused on providing software in the form of business intelligence capability, but now that is very much a secondary role of Strategy. It is almost exclusively focused on this idea of being a Bitcoin treasury company. How can we understand what that's all about? Well, let's have a look at what the company itself says. By using proceeds from equity and debt financings, as well as cash flows from operations, we strategically accumulate Bitcoin and advocate for its role as digital capital. Our treasury strategy is designed to provide investors varying degrees of economic exposure to Bitcoin by offering a range of securities, including equity and fixed income instruments. And we will have a look at this as we move our way through this discussion. The founder of the company, and in fact the current chairman, is this gentleman over here on the screen, becoming quite a well-known face now. His name is Michael Saylor. He was recently featured as the cover of the Forbes magazine. Maybe some people might see that as somewhat auspicious given the track record of people who have previously been featured as the cover of Forbes, but I won't go down that path in this video. Now, Michael Saylor founded the business analytics firm in 1989. He then ran it as the CEO until August of 22, and he is now the chairman of the company. During the dot-com era, he was a well-known executive of the internet bubble and was a multi-billionaire in the late 90s, thanks to his stake in MicroStrategy. However, during the year 2000, MSTR stock tumbled more than 90%. And this arose for at least two reasons. There were issues around questionable accounting, and that led to a restatement of the company's financial results, their obligations under securities laws, for example, and also, of course, during the same period, many e-commerce and dot-com companies were collapsing. In this edition of Forbes, they've estimated his wealth at approximately $10 billion. Now, let us turn to some relevant charts for this discussion. Let's begin by looking at the daily share price, going back here to August of 24, up until, in fact, the 19th of August of 2025 over here. And as can be seen, there was an absolute surge in the price of MSTR here in November of 2024, where the price moved way above $500 per share. That huge move must be explicable really in terms of the result of the US presidential election, which was known back in that time frame, and it was believed that, as more or less has turned out, that the president-elect, Donald Trump, who would then serve his second term, was in fact very favorably disposed towards the crypto markets. Since then, the price sold off quite substantially down here to somewhere around 250, 300, and moved pretty much sideways over here. Now, this candlestick chart is quite revealing in terms of the current price, or the price as of the August 19th date here. First of all, we can see that on this particular day, that was the 19th of August, the share price dropped by 7.4%. That's a big move, downward move for the share price. But perhaps from a technical analysis point of view, there are more worrying signs to do with the formation over here on the chart. First of all, we can see this blue line here, which is the 20-day moving average, has, in fact, just 2 or 3 days prior, dropped below the red line, which is the 50-day moving average. Many technical analysts interpret that as a fairly bearish signal. But perhaps even more alarming is this close here, down here at 336, which has dropped below the 200-day moving average. And as can be seen here, if we follow this green line, the 200-day moving average, we did just slightly pierce it back here, but this could be a more decisive breakdown from that long-term moving average. Now, if we turn our attention now to the daily price of Bitcoin, we'll look roughly at the same period, August 24 back here, to August 2025. In fact, this was captured on the 20th of August, since Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day, basically. What we see now is rather revealing in terms of the price formation for Bitcoin itself. And we are still some distance above the 200-day moving average on Bitcoin, which interestingly sits pretty much at exactly $100,000. There is one other chart formation that I'd like to point to on this chart, which is this, what might be called a double top formation here. We did reach up to, I think it was about 123,000 in July, early July of 25. And here, about 6 or 7 days previous to this particular close, we did come back and actually move slightly above that close. This big reversal day here could simply be explained as people who were either buying to get into the market if that limit had been broken, or people basically being stopped out who were long, or the other possibilities, people were being stopped out if they had a short position. That could account for this reversal day here. Anyway, we're currently sitting, as this is being recorded, at about $113,000 per Bitcoin. Now, going back to the strategy website, they themselves have some really key metrics, relevant metrics for people who are investors in the stock. So you can see here that in fact is what we just saw on the chart, the 2 charts back. That is the strategy price as of the 19th of August, 336. And as I said before, that was a 7.5% drop on the previous close. You can see the 3-month return down 19%. Now, what I want to really focus on are a couple of really pertinent metrics for strategy. The first, I'm going to jump straight to it, is this number here, the so-called mNAV. And you can see that this is being calculated actually in real time, or is calculated in real time by strategy, and that is sitting at 1.56. Now, what does the mNAV actually mean? Well, basically the idea is that if you take the company's Bitcoin holdings, which are here, 71 billion, they have almost 630,000 Bitcoin, and that was the price. We just more or less saw that on the last chart. And you multiply this out, you find that the company's holdings of Bitcoin come to 71 billion. Now, then if you say, use that as the denominator, and then you use as the numerator, well, in fact, they use the enterprise value, this number here, 110 billion. Then if you, as I say, take that number divided by that, you end up with this mNAV here. What that effectively is saying is that the people who are buying into strategy, buying shares and, as we'll see, other securities, are giving a 50% premium to strategy, as opposed to, let's just say, buying the Bitcoin itself. They must have confidence and faith that this company knows what it is doing, and that's why they're prepared to provide essentially $1.50 to buy $1 worth of Bitcoin. That may or may not turn out to be such a clever idea. We'll have to see as time. We'll have to see over time, of course. The other possibility in terms of calculating the mNAV, which is not shown here, would be to take the market cap of strategy, which is the number of outstanding shares, common equity, multiplied by the share price, which gives you that $95 billion value. And if that was used as the numerator with that same denominator over here, this mNAV, of course, number would be somewhat lower, somewhere in the 1.4 region. You can see the company has $8.2 billion worth of debt. And in fact, the enterprise value would be both this number, that number, and some other issues that perhaps relate to the other part of the business. Now, before we move on, let me just give you the following. The credit rating, because there is obviously this $8 billion worth of debt here, the credit rating for the company from S&P Global is B-, which means that it is technically a sub-investment grade credit or sub-investment grade company, sometimes described as a junk bond. So the bonds or the notes that have been issued by strategy are deemed to be junk bonds, essentially. Interestingly, Moody's, the other main credit rating agency, has withdrawn its credit rating for the company. It did previously provide one, but has stopped providing a credit rating for the company. That may or may not be that significant. Now, going back to the mNAV, this is the ratio that I mentioned, and the mNAV essentially is the value of the company. Strategy themselves use the enterprise value, as I said, divided by their Bitcoin holdings. The historical record in the public domain for the mNAV values is somewhat patchy. But anyway, Grok managed to put this together, and we can see here that the mNAV back here in May 22 at 0.5. This surged all the way up to almost 3.5. That coincides with the surge in the share price of MSTR, which I discussed earlier, around the same time as the election results were known in November 24. And as we can see over here, during this period here into August of 25, the mNAV, according to this Grok chart, is sitting at around 2. Well, we know because we just saw on the previous slide that in fact the company itself has valued the mNAV itself at about 1.5, just a little bit above 1.5, but that was based on the enterprise value as opposed to the market cap. I've already covered that issue. Before we move on from the mNAV, which of course is a quite critical metric for the company, I want to discuss briefly a strategy that has been adopted by a well-known short seller in equity markets, and his name is Jim Chanos, and he has publicly stated that as one of his short strategies, he's taken the view that this mNAV is unjustifiable for many reasons, which I won't go into. Basically, the way he's exploiting his perspective is he buys Bitcoin, so he's long Bitcoin, but he is short the shares of strategy, MSTR. And he believes that this premium, this shown here at 2, but maybe more currently at 1.5, is unjustified. And to the extent that the mNAV or spread between these starts to diminish or contract, his trade obviously is a winning trade. If he's long Bitcoin and short the shares and the mNAV moves down, maybe closer to 1 or even below 1, then he's fine because his strategy benefits because the spread goes in the right direction from his point of view. It narrows. I mentioned that there are these various instruments that people who decide to buy strategy, the company's shares, there are both common shares available, preferred shares. In fact, more recently, the company's been issuing quite a lot of preferred stock, but it's also been issuing bonds effectively, or notes. And I want to discuss just one of several such notes that the company has issued. This goes back to November 2024. Now we know also that was when the stock price of MSTR was surging. Now these instruments are known as convertible notes. What that means is that the investors buy these notes, and these are essentially hybrid securities. They start life effectively as a bond, but under certain conditions. The company, in this case, MSTR or strategy, can convert those notes or bonds into common equity. Now, in November 24, MSTR raised almost $3 billion through a sale of these senior convertible notes. In terms of this particular offering, these notes are due or need to be paid back in December 2029. And it's also worth pointing out that there's no coupon or no interest is being paid on these notes. So the conversion rate for the notes was set at this number here, 1.4872 shares of MSTR's Class A common stock. The way this would work then is that if you had bought the notes, the company has the option to convert the bonds essentially, or the notes, into Class A common shares. And the conversion rate was set there, this number, which related to the price of the shares back in November 24. It was based on a premium of 55% over the price of MSTR's Class A common stock in November 2024. And the price at that time was for 33.70. So you do the maths, you take this 55% essentially uplift on that, and this equates to a baseline conversion price of that dollar amount there, 672. It's also worth noting, and this would appear in the prospectus and the filing on this particular offering with the SEC, that MSTR has the option to call in the notes for cash after December 2026 if the stock price is at least 130% of the baseline conversion rate. In other words, this rate here, or essentially that price there. Now, if you do the simple maths on 130% above that, you're into a number that is close to $870. Now, that might well be a very optimistic projection for MSTR share price, but at least the company has until December 2029 to see if, in fact, that share price is realized. What I want to do now is to explain how I created the beta of the share price of MSTR, not as one would see it normally expressed in relation, say, to the benchmark index in the US, the S&P 500, or perhaps the NASDAQ 100, but maybe more pertinently, the beta with respect to the price of Bitcoin itself. Now, what I've used for this is the ETF. This is the BlackRock ETF, IBIT, which is a very close proxy to Bitcoin. There's reasons for doing that because this trades on a Monday through Friday basis. Bitcoin, in fact, itself trades 7 days a week. What I did then was to collect the ETF price for this and MSTR, and this begins actually back at the beginning of 2024 when the SEC approved the ETFs for tracking Bitcoin. And I put this into Excel. I have explained this elsewhere on my YouTube channel, and I use what's known as a linear regression technique to calculate the beta, which is in fact the way that it is done. There are approximately 400 blue spots on this graphic relating to the price movement of MSTR on each day and the price movement of IBIT on each day. You can see them. This is the axis for MSTR. This is the axis for IBIT. You can see we have all these spots. Then what Excel can do is create this line here, this diagonal red line, which is known as the line of best fit or the linear regression. And from this exercise, we end up with an equation which covers this red line here, the diagonal. And with that equation, you can see it here, y equals 1.46x plus this value here. We end up with two very useful metrics in finance. This is the slope or gradient of this red line. And that, in fact, is the beta. That's what we set out to find. We can see an R-squared value of close to 0.6, which is very encouraging. Now, why this is relevant is because this is telling us, in effect, that the sensitivity or volatility, perhaps, of MSTR with regard to the price of Bitcoin is about 50% higher than the volatility of IBIT itself. Now, obviously, that will then impact on the mNAV issue. It is more likely to trigger various, say, conversion prices, the ones we talked about earlier. And it also adds an additional, if you like, risk element to the idea of MSTR really being a good proxy for the Bitcoin price. So I hope very much that you found that video to be of interest, and could I encourage you then to subscribe to my channel, the Corcoran Codex, where I will be adding similar material, and you can see the general theme of this YouTube channel is analyzing critical ideas and episodes in the world of finance. Thank you very much for watching.